Hi, this is Martin Fowler, and you're listening to the Agile Uprising.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agile Uprising podcast. I am your host today, Troy Lightfoot, and with me I have a very special guest, Mr. Prateek Singh. Hello, Prateek. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's a Friday. We're recording at the end of May, and the summer is approaching. So I'm not the biggest fan of summer, but my wife is, so I'm happy for her. So that's what's going on my end. How about
Because
you?
your wife is one of the biggest fans of summer, that means you are one of the biggest fans.
There you
of summer.
go. So I would imagine there'll be more outdoor activities we'll be doing reluctantly from me. But anyway, so that's what I got going on. Well, thank you, Prateek. Let's just right out of the gate. Why should a product manager or a product owner or a business owner or an SVP of the head of product at some company, why should they care about flow metrics, anything like that? Why would that be something on their radar?
Yeah, it's great because it's so funny how flow has been constrained to being the, hey, little development teams worry about that stuff. We don't worry about that stuff.
Right.
For a product person, for someone who's steeped in product management or as leader of product, probably your most important aspect of your job is figuring out how to satisfy the needs of the customer, how to flow value to customers so that we're making customers happy so that then they give us a return on investment, or even if they don't know there are customers yet, we're creating a need by putting something out there. How are we flowing value to the market so that our customers are happier? How are we satisfying that my guess is, and I might be wrong on this, if you are concerned with product, that is one of your major concerns.
Right. Thank you, Prateek. So when I think about flow, I think of the ability to, and you can, chime in if you have a different definition. I'm curious to hear it actually, but I think about the ability to deliver fast, frequently, and predictably, right?
Yeah.
Can we deliver fast? Can we do it often and continuously, right? Not just fast a few times. And then how predictable can we deliver those things, right? And I would say if you have speed, frequency, and predictability, you would have to have established flow to achieve that, like over time, right? So I think if we talk in terms of, can we test our ideas fast, right? Can we test our ideas frequently? And can we accurately forecast when we could test those ideas? I think a product manager might care about that, right? What do you think?
Yeah, that's the point. If you care about the thing that we were just talking about, which is flow of value to customers,
right,
or even flow of experiments to discover value to customers,
right.
If you care about either of those things, which I'm hoping as a product manager you care about that,
right.
As a product person you care about that, the principles of flow, the metrics of flow that Troy you were just talking about, those matter quite a bit because we like to say this that being agile means trying to find out how wrong you are as quickly as possible. My guess is as if product management was easy, if product development was easy, everyone will build the right product efficiently, effectively, predictably. It will just happen.
Right.
But it's not easy, which means we are more likely to get our product ideas wrong than right. So we want to use these flow metrics, use the concepts of flow to figure out how wrong we are so that we can adjust and be less wrong as we move along.
Why don't we dig into that? Because while I agree with you, I think a lot of people that are in product positions, right? They have a prioritization technique. And, I've been to many companies, different people use different techniques. they put a different amount of weight into those techniques, meaning there's a lot of time spent on trying to prioritize the backlog to where we get it just right. And this will be the value in this order, right? I mean, I'm talking about days, weeks, months prioritizing stuff, right? And what you're saying is, even if we prioritize it, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but reiterating what I think I'm hearing, even if we prioritize it and spend a year prioritizing a backlog, we still could be wrong about what we're delivering. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's the thing. Unfortunately, a lot of traditional frameworks, conventional frameworks, have misguided product folks into believing that backlog management is their job.
Mm,
I would say that is probably the least of your job, of a job. And the reason product folks go there is because they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to maximize the value that flows through their system. That's why we're trying to figure out how valuable everything is so we can line them correctly. Unfortunately, as you all know, as all the listeners probably know, as soon as you prioritize the thing, that prioritization is obsolete. As soon as you prioritize your backlog, it's obsolete because things change on a daily basis. Something new shows up. Some developer will come by and say, yeah, that thing you want me to do, it's almost impossible, or it will take me 2 years to do it.
right.
Or any of those random things can happen to make that prioritization obsolete. What we would rather do is get our ideas to production as quickly as possible so that we can test out and invest as little in that idea so that we can test it out directly with customers and find out, hey, is this the right thing? Is this the right thing?
Right.
And we're not getting into this too much here. We shouldn't probably because we'll give away everything here. By doing that, what happens is if you match the rate at which you are getting things to production to the rate at which you pick up stuff, the faster you get things to production, the more often you pick up new things.
Yep.
Which means your prioritization happens when you pick up new things with the most information you have at that point of time, rather than doing it all upfront.
Right. That's a great point. So, flow from the perspective of learning if we're building the wrong things, learning if we're building the right things, learning if what we're building is effective for the users, right, and for the company. And then the other side of it is, and obviously, learning if we're building the right or wrong things is going to lead to improved financial impact, right? There's also simply just the cost. So, for example, if you spend X amount of dollars on building something, the longer it takes to realize the value of that, and the more delays you have in realizing the value of it, you could be significantly impacting the return on that investment, right? So there's also the element of speed and frequency when it comes to just maximizing ROI, aside from even just learning about building the right thing or not. It's kind of twofold.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, you use the key word there, learning, right?
Right.
If we treat our systems, which include product development, operations, everything, as learning systems, then the speed of learning becomes important, and the way you optimize the speed of learning is by optimizing flow. And
Right.
that's where all these traditional flow metrics like cycle time, throughput, WIP, age, all those come into play.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So one other thing I wanted to talk about is the tendency for human beings to have deterministic thinking in pretty much all aspects of life, right? And one of the things I recently ran an AMP class, and in that, a couple recently, but in that class, we were going over the things in life which are actually deterministic versus probabilistic, like real life things, right? Every day,
Mhm,
what do we do? That how much of what we do is actually deterministic, and the kind of the what we came up with in the class is almost zero. Like
mhm.
almost every single thing. And when we say probabilistic, maybe Prateek, why don't you, for the audience, why don't you define what that sounds like? A kind of like a buzzword, E. So what does that really mean in practicality? What does probabilistic mean?
Yeah, probabilistic thinking essentially means accepting the fact that there are multiple futures that are possible,
Yeah.
and then figuring out which of those futures are more likely than others. What is
Mhm.
the probability of future A happening? What is the probability of future B happening? Um, for example, when you are tossing a coin, there are the one of the futures possible is it lands at head, one of the futures possible it lands on tail.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know which one of those future will happen,
Yeah.
but we can say there's 50% chance of heads and 50% chance of tails.
Right.
That is probabilistic thinking, not saying that this is the exact thing that will happen, but knowing that multiple different options are available.
Right. And so how that relates to product management is, there's a couple ways. The most obvious one is trying to deterministically pick a date for a release, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, you can pick a date, right? But to say this amount of scope will be released on this date with 100% certainty is a deterministic approach to that, right? But the other side, and so for people that are into flow and flow metrics and who've been listening to this podcast for potentially years, maybe this is your first time, you've probably heard us talk about this concept of probabilistic thinking when it comes to delivery, right? But now we're talking about something different. We're really talking about probabilistic thinking when it comes to value, which is not something as often talked about in at least in the agile space much that I've heard. So why don't we talk about that? Probabilistic thinking when it comes to value. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I think some of the work, Troy, that you have done around this is pretty great. Where you've talked about taking this to the next level. So let's put. I'm gonna give the lower level thing, and then you take it to the
sure,
next
go
level.
ahead. Yeah,
yeah. The lower level thing for me is we cannot determine what value will be when something is delivered unless you have a government signed contract that says, you deliver by this date and how much money we're going to give you. Even in that case, it's kind of dodgy. But releasing a product out into the wild, releasing a feature out into the wild, we have no idea what that value will be. We have some sort of an inkling, oh, this thing might be valuable. That's why we're working on it. But we don't know if this thing will produce X amount of value or 10X amount of value or 100X amount of value. We have no idea where that will fall.
But Prateek, we spent 6 months in discovery. And then we had our financial analyst really go over how much these features are going to make us, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm just speaking for another company. I think we pretty much know how much it's going to make. What would you say to that, Prateek?
Yeah, I would. What I would love to do in that case, and I would love to find out because you're triggering me on something else. People call this stuff data-driven when it's just made up magical numbers driven.
Okay.
I would love to find out how accurate were those projections in the past.
Yeah.
Let me show me your last 50 features that you released and compare the value those generated to the value we had projected them to generate.
Yeah, the last large company, my last contract I was on, obviously I can't say what it was, but it was a very large company, very well-known global company. And they had a process which was a well-oiled machine when it comes to discovery, market analysis, product marketing analysis, financial analysis. They were really good at that stuff when it comes to doing their job, right? They're really smart people. And I show up and start talking about probabilistic thinking and how we should be thinking this stuff. And what's funny is one of the head product people there, I was getting some pushback in a meeting, which is a true story. And one of the head product people stepped in and said, we have spent so much money and time doing this stuff. And like almost every time it turns out wrong. It was him said that, not me. so that was kind of funny to hear that from him. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I think he just realized what I was saying was accurate, right? And sometimes it might be right. Who knows, right? Sometimes it might be right. Sometimes it might be close. But to assume that every time you do that upfront analysis that it's going to be correct is just that's a fallacy.
It's even worse. We think we can get better. That's the problem. The problem is, we were wrong. That's all right. Now we're gonna do this harder. We're gonna analyze the stuff even more, and it's gonna make it better.
Right.
Human beings are not good at this, and trying to get better. The problem with trying to get better with your financial forecast and with your your value forecast is that you end up spending more time doing that than actually building something and putting it out there and finding out if this very small investment is already paying off for us or not.
Right. And you have so full transparency for the listeners, we have a class as part of Pro Kanban that's all around this topic, right? And in that class, there's an element of something called thinking in bets from, and it's not like she invented this, but there's a book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, right? And so maybe you can talk about this concept from a product perspective of thinking in bets. What does that mean at a high level?
Yeah, Annie Duke's a World Series of Poker winning poker player. She's written a good amount of stuff around this.
Mhm.
And what's great about her way of presenting this is because she's a poker player, she talks about everything as a bet,
Mhm.
as the bet you're making. And the way she talks about it is say, if you imagine every investment that you're making, and by the way, when you're building a product, you are making investment into that thing, hoping it will give you return. If you imagine every investment you're making as a bet, what you want to do is make these bets as small as possible so that you don't keep losing money. You don't want to bet everything on one thing, and then if it loses, you're bankrupt.
Right.
You want to make small bets, and as you see that this thing is working out for you, make those bets incrementally bigger rather than going all in just because you think that just because you did some estimation and figured out that this was be very valuable.
Right. So so we could think about bets in product development, right? As the amount of money obviously you're investing in finding out if it's the right or wrong thing, the amount of time you're investing, right? Because there's a correlation between time and money. There's an exact correlation in the sense of you could say, well, there's a run rate of how much it costs to build things, and then there's also more of a qualitative correlation when it comes to uh, well, hey, maybe we're not directly spending, maybe it's just sitting in a queue, for example, right? And we're not actively working on it. So from a development perspective, we're saying we're not spending any development dollars on it. But the longer it takes to find out if it is the right or wrong thing, or the longer it takes to find out if the bet's going to pay off or not, there's also a financial aspect to that too, right? Because you're you can basically be wrong about your assumptions, be wrong about what that value is, and you're delaying that information about knowing if you're being wrong about it. And so because of that, you could be impacting your ROI. And also, the more WIP is in your system, the more that's taking up your capacity at any time, which actually could be preventing you from starting new things, like you mentioned, which actually might be more beneficial, which you don't know, right? So there's all these elements about time and how that correlates to a bet size, right? Which I find pretty fascinating, right? Yeah, and I wanted to thank you for that because you're one of the first people, Prateek, that I've heard really talk about it in that way, and so thanks for that. Thanks for bringing some of this thinking, into the public and into our space. So why don't we talk about learning more, right? Obviously, we have a class that we're talking about. It's a brand new class. You can go to the procommon.org website, look up Accelerating Product Value courses. I'll put the link in there. I have a class I'm running in June myself, first time. So if you want to come to that, feel free. I'll put the link, ping me. I'm happy to give any listeners a discount as well, of course. But yeah, I'm excited to teach this class. It's something I'm very passionate about. It kind of blends product management with flow. So two things I'm really passionate about. So aside from the class, though, how about further reading, further learning, videos, your YouTube channel, anything you want to suggest, Prateek?
Yeah, I mean, the Dan Vacanti and I, just you were crediting me. I'll credit Dan with a lot of this thinking, bringing a lot of this thinking into our
Mhm.
community. Dan Vacanti and I have a YouTube channel called Drunk Agile, where we drink whiskey and talk about this kind of stuff.
Okay.
So feel free to check us out.
Right.
If you're looking for some reading material, Annie Duke, you mentioned Thinking in Bets. Another book by her, which I liked, at least I liked the first half of it, is
Okay.
called Quit.
Okay.
That features in that class as well. So you'll get a few more Annie Duke things. I just happen to have Douglas covered How to Measure Anything sitting here, so
Okay.
I'll recommend that as well.
Okay.
It's because we're talking about flow metrics and all that stuff, the real reason you measure flow metrics is to do the things that we've talked about on this podcast, is to learn faster. So when you're measuring stuff, Douglas Hubbard says it should have a reason, and that is the reason.
Right.
Douglas Hubbard's How to Measure Anything, and I, it almost feels like I always recommend this book, Principles of Product Development Flow by Don Reinhartson.
Okay.
For some reason, it's like I keep recommending it, and people keep reading it, so it's great. And more people read that stuff,
Yeah.
better.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Prateek. One last thing I was going to mention. When you were talking, it just popped in my head. But just like focusing on getting better at estimating, as far as delivery, story points, whatever hours, whatever you want to call it, right? Focusing on getting better at estimating doesn't actually control how long things are going to take, right? In order to control how long things are going to take, you have to do the things daily, right, to control that. It doesn't matter how good or bad you are at estimating. The same concept when it comes to value realization, right? Just because you spend all this time up front estimating what the value of something is, it's not actually how you control what the value is. Now, obviously, there's two parts to that, right? There's thinking about what might be needed, and you are obviously, if you just come up with the worst ideas ever consistently, then that's an element of control, right? So you need some way of determining what could be good ideas, right? That's true. And then the second part, though, is controlling how valuable it is really what you're talking about. How we control that is to actually get it in the hands of people, right? And that's where the concepts of improving flow daily, weekly, monthly, as continuously will help us with value realization more so than upfront estimation. So, I was just thinking about it. There's like a nice correlation between like estimating how long something will take and then estimating value. They're kind of related.
Yeah, just for your listeners, you heard it here first, and you'll hear this over and over again. Creating value is more important than estimating value.
There you go. Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you, Prateek. That's I think that's good enough for today. It kind of gives an intro to this concept. And maybe if you're out there, if you like what we're talking about, if you want to go deeper into any of the topics, obviously this is pretty high level right now. We're just introducing this as a concept. I'm happy to do more episodes on it, more deep dives. So we have a Discord channel out there. It's totally free, the Agile Uprising Discord. You can come in there, you can ask your questions, and you can say, I'd love an episode on something Prateek said or something Troy said, and just a particular episode on that one statement maybe. So yeah, we're willing to go down the rabbit hole further if you'd like. Otherwise, enjoy the summer, folks. All right. Thank you very much, Prateek.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Troy. Thanks to everyone for listening.